Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back for another episode of About Bees, Culture and Curiosity with your hosts, Ron Miksha and
Bedzina Mosiashvili.
And Bedzina, what do we have on the go for today?
Today we're going to be talking about the bumbling bee.
The bumbling bee.
Yeah, I think you said they can't fly. They're not aerodynamic or something. They can't. They have helium.
Yeah, they're filled with helium. That's how they're able to get around. But we have an expert here, somebody who might set us straight on that concept. And could you please introduce yourself, Matthias?
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me on the show. And
You bet.
my name is Matias Fenton. I'm biology instructor and professor here at Mount Royal University. And I'm also interested in bees. Particularly, I'm part of the Alberta Native Bee Council too, which is where I met Ron. And Ron invited me today because bumblebees are one of my passions recently, and I am in charge of one of the projects that deals with them with the council, and I know about their results, like the data, and I can talk to what bumblebees like and make my own observation.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. And as our typical podcasts unfold, we kind of drift around all over the place and chat about a lot of different topics. So, Matthias, is it okay if I call you Matthias or Professor Fenton? Or
no, Matthias is better.
Matthias is better.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good. I'm good with that too. So, Matthias, you are teaching, working, a biology instructor here at Mount Royal, which is where the studio is that we're recording from. So you didn't have far to go to get here.
No, I don't. My department is right around the corner.
Right around the corner from the studio.
Yeah.
And how long have you been right around the corner from the studio?
So I started teaching at Mount Royal in 2016, but I've been away since 2017 and came back in 2022. So
Okay.
really for the last 2 years I've been here.
Yes. But you have about an 8-year history with this campus.
Yeah, I know a lot of the people longer than 2 years. So since I first started. Yes.
Yeah. And what are some of the courses that you are actually teaching?
So my favorite course I teach is ecology, intro to ecology and evolution. And I also teach cell biology and just the intro into evolution of plants and animals too, in general. So I do a lot of labs too, so practical stuff. That's really, I like to be applied. And I learned that early on that the theory is nice, but I always like to apply it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't apply it any more than you can with ecology.
Yeah, ecology has a lot of ways that you can like get into it and be applied, for sure. Yeah.
And do you know, like in an earlier discussion with Bedzina on one of our earlier episodes, we talked really briefly about the interrelationship between bees, wasps, ants, and how far back they go. And you probably know some of that.
Yeah, just this week we talked in lecture about a little bit how bees evolved from wasps. And that's what we know about 120 million years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there was an insect around longer than 120 million years.
Yes.
Other insects.
Yes.
And some of them became wasps,
Right?
and then some of the wasps became vegetarians.
Exactly. And that coincided with when there was more flowers.
Oh, of course.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So the flowering plants, they really diversified in that time period.
At about 120 million years ago.
Yeah. And that seems to coincide with, we have fossil evidence mostly, or bees preserved in amber.
Yes.
And those really started to diversify then.
Yeah.
And come descend from the wasps.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had bees, and that includes 20,000 or so species around the world of bees,
Right?
something like that.
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
And do you have some idea of when bees became honeybees and today's special topic, bumblebees?
Right.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure on that, but I know that a major step happened 90 million years ago.
Oh.
Where bees started to use other materials for the nests than
Yes.
just their own secretions and building cells from their own glands.
Oh.
So, for example, using rocks or using plant materials,
Mm-hmm.
learning that really expanded them into new habitats. When the honeybees exactly arose,
Yeah.
I'm not exactly
Doesn't really matter, but they did come after bees started to collect pollen.
Yeah. So
Right.
so if we kind of go through the steps, so it was wasps,
Yeah.
and then bees, or
Yeah.
it was wasps, bumblebees, honeybees, or it was wasp, honeybees, and
No,
then bumble.
it was wasps, primitive bees, and then more advanced bees like honeybees.
And primitive bees, would a bumblebee,
They'd be solitary,
would that be
I think.
primitive bee?
A bumblebee?
Yeah, or its ancestors.
I think bumblebees are fairly advanced now
Okay.
in terms of how
And they're social bees.
social they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very unusual strategy in bees. Like most bees are not social,
Right.
and bumblebees and also honeybees are.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of settles some that you owe me $20.
Yeah, I did. And then one last thing, would you happen to know when ants come play into all of this? So we established that wasps were first, and then ants. I thought it was the other way around. I thought it was ants first, and then wasps. But it was wasps, then ants. I heard. Is that true?
I don't know that for sure. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not an expert on ants, although I love them, but I don't know who was first.
Okay.
And they might just simply be cousins from some other previous creature too.
Right.
Like you know,
Well,
I
so
mean-
ants have two wings, right? The winged individuals of ants when they fly.
Yeah.
That's more similar to wasps because bees have four.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I think the ants will be more related to the wasps than the
Okay.
bees now are now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's probably the evidence leaning towards wasps. I mean, ants are older than bees.
I could imagine that, yeah.
Okay.
I suppose so.
Okay.
We need to look that up and
Yeah.
get some more information around
Set
it.
a hierarchy of no, we don't need to feed it.
So as this is both a podcast and a video cast, and the video cast is available on YouTube, and Bedzina that's your child. The YouTube you've been taking good care of. So
yeah, it's growing.
it's growing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that we will be describing some pictures for people who are simply listening.
Right.
And the people who are watching will have that extra little bit of being able to see something visual.
Yep.
So what are we looking at here? That looks like a very familiar Canadian flower.
Oh, yeah. This is actually a picture of a bumblebee on a thistle. So Canadian thistle.
Yes.
And how does a Canadian thistle look like? I know I'm looking at it, but just for the audio listeners.
It does have multiple flowers with little parts to it that are pink, and they are thorny sort of shrubs that can be up to like 50 centimeters, maybe a little taller even. And it's actually interesting. This is a Canada thistle, which is to this region considered more of an invasive plant. There's native thistles that look very, very similar, but the Canadian thistle is just like one of those plants that doesn't have many predators, so not many herbivores will eat it. Goats will eat it, but lots of deer, they will just avoid it.
Yeah.
And so it can spread really well. But the cool thing about it is there's a bee on it that's really from this area and that we're worried about, and it's using it. So I thought that would be a good picture.
Do you know the species of that particular
Yeah, that's the
bumblebee?
western bumblebee. And that was the only one I was able to see this year.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like when you were doing your field work, or what do you mean by
well,
that?
this is all on my during my private time. I go a lot of walks through Fish Creek Park. That's where I live, and other parks if I'm there. And then I just take observations as I go along. I don't do research with bees myself at the moment, at least.
Yeah.
But this is more like me personally trying to contribute to like monitoring what's around. So I take pictures,
And this went on iNaturalist, I hope.
it is, yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely great.
Got some comments. So I looked at, there's not too many of this species reported over the last years, but every year a couple in Calgary.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was lucky because this one was tired and it was just hanging out in the morning on the flowers, so I could take a lot of shots. And I got some good
It's
ones.
a beautiful picture. I hope people do jump over to the YouTube channel and take a look at that because it's a gorgeous photograph.
Thanks.
And I like the shout out, if we want to call it that, for iNaturalist. I want to add something just on the aside here. My youngest child is 17 years old and she's at McGill. And her very first biology class was, they had it divided into, she's going into the biology field. So my daughter Helen is going into biology, and her very first biological lab was to do an ecological walk around Mount Royal, the hill in Montreal, and take pictures to upload to iNaturalist. And I just thought that was such a cool idea to introduce these young people to this huge resource. And to know that you over here teaching at Mount Royal have also contributed to the same place. So it's one of those things that everybody's welcome to, I understand.
I don't know about iNaturalist.
Yeah, it's a citizen science platform. So it's basically an online website or an app where you can submit a photo and then get ID on what you're showing, like the species.
Oh.
And so you learn about what it is from others. And if you already know what it is, then you can also suggest that's what it is. And the additional effect is that you know where species occur, so that researchers have a good idea from people who just contribute whenever they have time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's got a really nice mapping feature to it.
Exactly,
So you
yeah.
can zoom into Calgary or zoom into your neighborhood and see what's been found around you. So, yeah.
And we have lots of people here at Mount Royal in our department who are advocating for it. And there's
Good.
the other university, Calgary, has a whole project on native pollinators on iNaturalist, and that's where I contribute.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I'm
Yeah.
really glad we took a side there and talked about that a bit, because that's a really nice resource for everybody. Like, we can all, even if we don't upload, we can go there and we can
It's
see.
public data, and
Yes.
everyone can go without an account to see it.
That's fantastic. Okay, our next photograph that we have up here is actually two images on one screen, and we have some ancient bumblebee nests that was actually built in the 1950s. Would you mind kind of holding it and showing a little bit of what we're, and maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is a man-made bumblebee box where the goal is that bumblebees will move in and have their nest there, so that we can look at that afterwards. And
So
in
where do they get
between
in? How do they
sometimes
get into that
They
thing?
go into that hole here that you see in the front.
And that's big enough?
It's big enough for bumblebees. Yeah, bumblebees aren't that big.
Mm-hmm.
They're just maybe a little bigger than a honeybee, but it's
Okay.
definitely big enough for.
And that looks very ancient. That box looks like it was built a long time ago.
Yeah, you told me that this is one of the original research boxes from southern Alberta here. Is that right?
Yes, it dates back into the 1950s.
Yeah, and so that's when bumblebee research was already starting. And one way to learn about their colonies is to have them nest in your box that you put out for them, because then you can later take it home when they're done, because they die over the winter. So then you can just study what they did, and you can also
So
usually
let's
there'll be
talk
some
about the
bees
fact
inside
that
still.
they die over winter.
Yeah.
We do have a picture up right now of the outside of of two, well, maybe it's the same one, of a bumblebee nest, and there's a bumblebee going in, and it looks like there is some white stuff behind the door, behind the little round door that the bumblebee is flying in. There is some felt.
Yeah, felt or cotton.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, when you set up a box that's just empty, that's not good enough for bumblebees to live in.
You mean empty, like no felt
Empty,
or anything?
no fillings. Yeah,
Right.
Just a empty, like a bird box. You would not put too much stuff in because they built their own nest.
Right.
The bumblebees look for pre-existing material that's soft, like cotton.
Okay.
And
okay.
They often use rodent nests for that, with
Okay.
old rodent nests. Yeah.
And only one bumblebee will live in this house.
No, so it will be initially just one. That will be the queen, who builds the nest, and then she'll raise a state of workers
Okay.
who then live all together in the same box. Yeah. So we'll have
How
one-
many will she hatch?
Yeah,
or
so
emerge?
that's a good question. It depends on the species. And usually she'll be able to provide for like 4 or 5 or a handful of workers in the first run. So that'll take about 4 weeks to raise them. She'll lay the eggs and get pollen for all of them. That's about how much she can do. And then these 4 or 5, or maybe more workers will help her with the next generation. And then over the season, the state can grow to like hundreds sometimes. Yeah.
And those workers one of them will turn into a queen?
Several.
Several, okay.
Yeah. So the workers, when they're born, they won't turn into a queen later. It's as determined at the egg what it's going to be, a worker or a queen. But once the colony has enough workers, the queen knows that she can now lay eggs that will become new queens.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that at the beginning she'll only have enough energy to collect pollen for 4 of them. So pollen. So what's up with pollen, and what did they use it for exactly?
Yeah. So they built these cells from wax, and then they will store the pollen in it and lay their egg on it, essentially, so that then they can seal that cell off, and the larva can hatch from the egg and eat the pollen. Yeah.
And I guess like is the pollen, is it research to like it's a protein? It's only a protein source, or what else is the larvae getting from the pollen?
Yeah, that's mainly like a protein source for
Okay.
growing. Yeah, growing really fast.
Is there anything else in there that it's benefiting from?
A bit of nectar. They
will use nectar later too to feed. But
and they glue the stuff together a little bit
yeah.
too.
Yeah, there's actually a few different strategies, I guess, among bees, what to feed their larvae.
Okay.
And what the mix is will depend on the species. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just very little curious about that because they became a vegetarian because of pollen, pretty much, and
Right.
they've seemed to desire pollen more than they do meat for some reason.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, pollen is pacifist. You don't have to take it down or kill it to eat it. It's basically easier than being a predator. You always have a risk of the prey fighting back or
Right. So
not being available.
This is a tough life.
the
I
predator
guess, yeah.
would be a wasp.
Yeah.
You know, wasp's body is designed
That is
to be
right.
sleeker and faster and has no hairs for collecting pollen.
Right. They don't collect pollen on their hair. Yeah.
They're bald, yeah. And you'd think that a bumblebee or a bee would do better in warmer in colder conditions because of their hair. But no, a wasp does way better in the rain, or I don't know. I see them flying in colder weather all the time with no problem, or even in the wind, where very strong winds, they have no problem.
So insect activity depends on the heat a lot. You were right about that. And bumblebees are actually really special. They warm themselves with their flight muscles.
Okay.
And they're pretty big, so they are actually pretty active when it's colder too. Like
Even in
among
rain?
bees, yes. Yep,
Oh,
they
okay.
can.
And bumblebees, if I'm right about this, they tend not to occur in hot climate continents like Australia and South America and like.
Not as maybe diverse, but I think they're in every continent at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of them.
But they like the cool weather.
Yeah, temperate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they deal well with it because they are adapted to being in a colder area.
Yeah.
And too hot is bad for them. Yeah.
And they can sting humans?
Yeah. They
Oh.
can.
Bumblebees?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah, right. Rose mentioned.
But they're pretty passive. They won't sting until threatened. Like
Yeah.
less.
Or if you
less-
get to their nest or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Then they feel threatened.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you had a couple incidents of them attacking.
Yeah, I had to scoop pollen out of the bumblebee nests for my research, and every time I opened a nest up, they just kind of flew up into my face.
Yeah.
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 But that's understandable.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
It's like when someone takes the covers off your bed in the morning.
Oh, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it sure would be quite a shock. I guess I would be pretty upset too.
Yeah.
So we have a picture up now of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bumblebees. They all look kind of smallish, so those are probably workers.
Yeah, these are all workers that are gathering around the hole in the sun. They're basically warming up. And some of them, the top ones, you can see the wings are moving.
Oh, yeah.
They're also, well, it's still image, but they were moving and they're fanning air into the box, fresh air, because it's warming up inside and they want to keep it nice and circulated.
Oh, that's really neat.
It was a hot day that day.
Yeah,
Or
when
just-
they can sense it getting kind of hot for our eggs. Let's keep the air flowing,
some
and
air
then
into there.
they have dedicated workers that will do that. They'll just stand there and
Are they like honeybees where is it 34 degrees or what is it they ideally like inside?
yeah. I think I read 30 last time. Around
Okay.
30 is where they become most active, and if it gets too hot, then things can get problematic for the.
Do we know
individuals.
like the internal body temperature of a bumblebee or a honeybee? What do they like internal? What's
I
internally?
think that would probably vary from
Yeah.
different parts of the body. It would be warmest right around their flight muscles.
Okay.
Right.
As Matthias has indicated, they can warm their own body up by detaching their wings from their wing muscles and then vibrating those muscles, just like, you get warm when you're exercising, you're moving your arms or whatever, that warms you up.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And they
Okay.
do that while they're still, and they, have to have some source of energy, which would be nectar from flowers. And then they would burn that energy to create heat.
So it wouldn't be like a mammal's body where it would be uniform temperature.
No, they're ectotherm,
Okay.
in that
Okay.
sense. Like they do some regulation, but they wouldn't be able to always regulate to stay at the same.
So that means they need
okay.
the sunlight. The
Yeah.
ectotherm is that they get their heat from outside the body.
Yeah, sunlight or other, like if the rocks are still
Yeah.
warm.
Yeah,
ex-
except that they
external source. Yeah.
can create some heat by.
Yeah.
And I understand that when the queen bee finds a nest and lays her first eggs and builds the nest, she has to do it all by herself. And she will, the bumblebees that I personally am familiar with usually lay a cluster of 8 eggs in a set. So that's, I mean, there are, 20, 30 species of bumblebees just in Alberta. So I only know about a couple of them. And I actually, to be honest, I can't even identify them. I'm just awful with identification. But anyway, I'm just thinking back to this queen bee inside of her nest on a cold, rainy day in April or May when she's come out of the ground, she started that nest. And I understand that they will actually, the female queen bumblebee will kind of sit on the cluster of eggs and warm them up just like a chicken would warm up a batch of eggs.
I think that's one of the behaviors.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just absolutely cool.
Yeah, especially on cold days, there's not much to do. So they do
Yeah.
have these little cells where they store honey from the
Yeah.
good days, and then they can eat that honey to power
Fantastic.
their muscle, right?
That is so interesting.
And those eggs probably contain some of that heat the bee's giving off, right? So it's almost using it as a
Yeah,
heat conductor or whatever.
probably.
I don't-
Yeah.
I
yeah.
don't think that's its intention, but
So the next photo that we want to talk about is a close-up inside of a bumblebee nest. And we can see groups of pods or cells, and there tend to be 8 in a cluster of these. So there's a group of 8, and then the queen would keep them warm. They would emerge, and the workers would go out and gather and then help make the nest bigger.
Yeah.
And you've seen some nests with how many in it?
So this year, probably close to 100.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
From one queen starting the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. So it in the literature, you can find that it can be up to 300, but that's pretty unusual. There's actually a lot of species that stay in a very small number, like up to 10, and there's short-lived colonies.
Oh, wow.
So
And that's
they're
it.
harder to find too because
Yeah.
of that.
So we are looking inside the nest. So could you walk us through just a little bit of what we're seeing and kind of their life cycle?
Okay, yeah. So we see the cells here that were built by the queen, and then later on with help of the workers. We see the cotton, so we can really see how the cells are nestled into an existing like warm material that keeps them nice and insulated because they start early in the year when it's pretty cold. These cells then had pollen in them, most of them, with an egg. And when they're closed still, you can expect that the egg is still or the larva is still in there or is pupating right now. And they will, some species will open it up to check on them and feed them more, and then close them up to give them time to become bee through metamorphosis, right? From a pupae.
Right.
And it takes about 4 weeks from the egg to the adult worker.
Okay.
So that's why the queen for the first 4 weeks is on its own doing all the work.
Wow. So very vulnerable for that nest, isn't it? Like if she gets...
if she dies, then the colony is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does happen a lot that the nest will fail, but that's why a colony will then at the end of its cycle in the year try and produce many queens so that some will make it to next year, right?
It almost looks like bubble wrap.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have these round shaped tops to the cells. Yeah, and
then
the size of the cells will tell you also what it was used for.
Okay.
So if you're really looking close, there might be some smaller ones.
Yeah.
Those will be worker cells that raised new workers, and then there would be some bigger ones that would have raised new queens because the queens are bigger.
And if you look very closely, they almost resemble a hexagon.
They do, yeah.
They almost, but just kind of that shows that how close a circle and a hexagon is.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
When you stack a bunch of circles and they start to get soft, as wax would do, then they kind of...
Yeah, I don't know if that's what the... yeah, you're right. I don't think that was the bumblebee's intention. It just made a bunch of circles.
I think so, too.
And they stack... It looked... Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And these, there are some, for those who are watching, to the right-hand side of the image, there are 3 open cells, and they have a little different kind of material around the top edge, which I think looks like wax. So could those be places where the bees would be putting nectar?
Yeah, they do have honey pots too.
Okay.
And then they will store honey in them for overnight and during bad days.
Okay.
And just powering themselves up before they go out, take a sip and then you're good to go until you find the flowers.
So the adult bumblebees, will they also eat pollen?
Not too much, no.
They're mostly on nectar.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, the pollen is the protein that builds the body for the youngsters.
But honeybees will eat pollen.
A little bit. I think it'd be about the same as bumblebees. They, just to kind of maintain the body's tissue.
So when we feed pollen patties, they're regurgitating that to their baby bees?
Absolutely. That's what's going on.
Okay.
Yes. You got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to another picture here.
4 years in, I just figured that out.
This again, the inside of a bumblebee nest on our next picture. And here, it just looks like a scattered mess. The first image we saw inside the bumblebee nest looked a lot cleaner and neater. And now, so this must be a little further along in the season.
Yeah, it seems like there's almost you see a bee there, it might be dead, right? And that's what happens at the end of the season. Some of the workers will still stay around, but the queen dies eventually. And then the workers will actually keep doing their job until they also die. But their lifespan of a worker is just about a month too. So
I see.
After the queen has died, after a month later, then everyone basically is done. And the new queens that they produced, they had left, and they're hiding somewhere outside.
They've already left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is almost semi-abandoned.
I guess
yeah,
it
this
is.
one looks probably semi-abandoned.
Just like Moscow in the
Yeah.
Tolstoy book.
Yeah.
It
And then
looks
it attracts
full.
a lot of other animals or insects too, who want a part of the leftover honey and the wax. There's actually
well, you
some.
brought us a picture here that I think demonstrates that.
Yeah.
And if we kind of look at this picture, we start with an open, dead bumblebee nest in a wooden box.
Yeah,
And we're zooming in.
that's right. And this is kind of showing how the nest was in the cotton. I opened the cotton here so we could see it.
Looks like a horror show.
Yeah, it's like a town inside that cotton ball, inside that box.
And things are dead.
You do see some little larvae of wax moths here.
Yes.
Who are feeding on the wax cells.
Yeah.
And they're a parasite, but they tend to move in towards the end of the season and then start from the outside. And then when the bees are gone, then they take over the whole wax and feed on it. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a way for nature to clean up, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like-
that's
like
right.
If there's any disease or any residual viruses or anything, then it's all disintegrated.
Yeah.
And is it typical for a queen bee to reuse a nest the next year? Not the same nest necessarily, but to reuse any nest that's left out there, or is it still a little bit too frightening for the queen?
So it's a good question. I've read that some species actually tend to not leave too far from where they were born, like that nest, because they then also end up in the nest next year. Like sometimes there's just these good spots that they want to, and then they have learned that.
Right.
Yes.
But usually when the nest is used and it's not cleaned up completely, or there's like this, what we're just seeing in the picture, like this old nest still, it hasn't decomposed, then that's
Right.
not a good place to start a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty nasty. It looks really nasty. I've
Yeah.
often thought that bumblebees are so cute and cuddly when they're working on the flowers, but then you follow them back to their apartment and you say, okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Where the honeybee is not quite as cute. They're nice looking creatures, but they're not as cute.
Right.
But you come back to a honeybee nest and it's so tidy.
Yeah, they clean up way better.
The
Yeah.
wasps are pretty tidy too.
Yeah, true.
That's true too. Yes, it is. The wasps are tidy.
Yeah, but I think there's the honey collection here attracts a lot of other
Okay.
things. That should be the same in honeybee hives, though, right? That honey
Yes.
attracts a lot of.
It does. It does
Others.
attract a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes actually with you today, unfortunately. So I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit, but I wanted our listeners to
Got
get
about
a
20
pretty
minutes.
Good, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
20 minutes is good. I wanted to get a little bit of a background on how bumblebees actually live. And the next image that I have up, that we have up, is a picture of about 25 or so bumblebees of central Alberta.
Yeah, this is a new guide to help people learn how to identify them, because these are all different species. And
There are
you
that
can-
many species in Alberta?
Yeah, over 30 for sure.
Over 30.
Yeah.
And what makes a species a species? Like why, like there's been no interbreeding among
right.
any of these. They're
Yeah.
all individual species.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I were to just kind of describe it as like a layperson, so just we have a list of probably maybe 20 bees here, and just these. You could correct me on these names, but the first one here we have B. tyrannus,
Ternarius. Yeah.
ternarius,
Yeah.
and then the next one we have B. hunti.
And
Yeah.
may I just interject there? When you say B, that stands for bombus.
Okay, bombus hunti.
Yeah.
And then I'll do a third one as well, a bombus rufnictus.
Rufosinctus.
Ruficindus, and then so the difference between them. So the first one it has two orange strips, a yellow strip, and then a black strip.
Yeah.
And then the middle abdomen has some sort of kind of protruding black pattern coming out.
Yep.
But whereas with the bee hunty, it looks exactly the same, except it doesn't have that protruding black pattern coming out on its abdomen.
Yeah.
And then the Ruficuntus,
Rufosinctus.
that one it's completely orange, its bottom, and it has a little black line, and then a gray shadow on its abdomen, and a dot. So if they look almost exactly the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're hard to distinguish.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't distinguish one bumblebee from
Yeah,
another.
it takes some practice. But the first two that you mentioned, they're very common here, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And even on platforms like iNaturalist, where people submit their images, you need to learn that for these two, if you want to distinguish them, you need to get a shot from above. Otherwise, you can't see that little black protruding piece that you mentioned, right, on the thorax.
Yeah, it's wild.
So it's always good to have multiple pictures if you're trying by picture. But if you have a specimen, then there's quite a few experts who would be able to tell. And it's based on hair color on the head, in the face, and then hair color on the sides, and then the order of colors in general.
Do they tend to have differences beyond coloration, like different size, like average size? Or
different tongue length is a big
tongue
one.
length, okay.
Because they access different flowers.
Right. I was wondering about that. So as far as biodiversity is concerned, we want a wide variety of species.
That's probably why there are so many different species, because there's a lot of different
native flowers.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say native flowers that specifically benefit from one species or another of the bumblebee.
Yeah. I would just kind of observation. They're almost as diverse. Well, probably more diverse than humans in terms of hair color. Because a lot of mammals they're very uniform. Like black bear's a black bear, a grizzly bear's a grizzly bear, and then you'll get some odd variations here. But with the bumblebees, or I guess even with the honeybees, man, you get so many different variations in the hair color. Yeah. So their bodies seem to be different, but their color of hair goes all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and is that an evolutionary trait, or what's up with?
I think it's suspected that they are trying to mimic poisonous creatures with their color patterns
in their area,
or So, for example, wasps. If they look similar to wasp insects that have learned not to eat wasps, they would also not eat them.
Oh, safe. That's a really neat trick.
So the bees are copying the wasps.
Maybe some of them. Yeah.
Because there's these parasite wasps that will get inside of.
Well, and wasps are just generally dangerous to some animals to eat. Where it could also indicate poison. We see these colors, right? This is what we see, but there's also the whole other UV spectrum that we can't even see that well.
Right.
So they might even look much different and much more scary to predators that have different vision.
I haven't thought of that. So to us, we're seeing two species that look almost identical. We could hardly tell them apart except for maybe one little dot somewhere. But to another bee, the yellow part might actually have stripes of an iridescent ultraviolet color.
That's right.
Which to us just shows up as nothing, like it just blends in with the yellow.
Yeah.
And the next bee could look the same to us and not have the ultraviolet in it.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I just find it so fascinating that we would have so many different species, but I guess we have so many different kinds of wildflowers, and some of them live in the ground.
Yeah.
Some live higher up.
Yeah. In terms of the nest. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're getting into the meat of today's podcast, and that is that you did an analysis of bumblebee nests. So if you could kind of walk us through where the nests came from, who they were given to, and then and the objective of this particular analysis that we're going to look at just today is to determine ideal locations for people who want to put a bumblebee nest in their backyard.
Yeah. So this is a project by the Native Bee Council, who wants to understand where bees occur and what kind of nests or what kind of locations the nests are best placed to help them out to have more spaces to nest. And we invite people to take part in this project in their own property or wherever they have the option to put up boxes. They can put them up and then just report on how it went. And then based on the results, we can tell other people what works best.
Right. And what was the findings?
Yeah. So if we go forward,
yes.
Here's there's a general overview of how often these artificial boxes that we put out for them are used, and it's about a fifth of the time, so 20%. So if you put 5 boxes, one of them will likely be occupied on average.
Yes.
Yeah. Unless then maybe you place them even in better spots, which is one of the reasons this project was also undertaken, to find out how can we do maybe better placement.
Right.
But it's important to realize that bumblebees, they do find natural spots, and that they might be even better than a box in terms of how they're insulated and what materials there are in there.
Right.
So you can't just buy mouse hair and put it in your box.
Okay. So when you put these nests, or people put these nests out, the boxes, we'll call them domiciles when they're empty. Well, they're domiciles, homes for the bumblebees.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily capturing or giving homes to all the bumblebees in a neighborhood?
No,
Just some of them
exactly,
will
yeah.
end up here. Some will end up where inside of a house or underneath the steps going into a house or
bumblebees are actually known to mostly be ground nesters.
okay.
So it's actually pretty hard for us to put a nest underground.
Yes.
So these boxes, people have tried to put them underground, but then they will just get moldy.
Okay.
Right? So it's not going to be very easy to imitate what they normally use.
Right.
But they do sometimes use them above the ground too, and that's when the boxes can be really, like, in addition, because most people don't have tons of trees with holes in there
Yes.
that the bumblebees could nest in their yard, so that'll be an additional option.
Right.
Yep.
And on average, the citizen scientist who borrows these boxes and puts them out in their backyard can hope that they will have about a 20% success rate
Yeah,
inside these boxes.
on average, yeah.
Yes.
But we do have some people who get some every year for years in a row.
Wow.
So they found a good spot.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure sounds like it.
Yeah.
And you analyzed over a period of 4 years, a total of almost 400
Yeah. almost
domiciles.
Yeah.
And out of those 400, roughly 300 were never occupied.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's about a fifth. Yeah.
about a fifth. Yeah. So now, what did you learn?
Yeah, so the main effect with these boxes that we found is that placing them on the ground is a little worse than if you hang them up a little higher. So let's say just a half a meter above the ground on some sort of structure, that's what bumblebees will prefer in terms of boxes.
Huh.
Yeah.
They like it lower.
They like
You
it higher.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, which is counterintuitive because normally you think they're underground nesters
Yeah.
more common, so they should like it lower. But
Okay.
it seems with the boxes, they like it better when it's not on the ground. And this might be, makes sense that they're not as attackable from the ground. They're not as affected by the ground moisture,
Oh, yes.
and they're sort of a bit more, safe.
Now, if you were to bury it in the ground, what would?
Yeah, that's
What do you think?
people try that, and there's lots of people who build bumblebee houses in Europe that I know that are like that. They dig them in the ground a little bit, and it works too. It's just much harder, like I said, to keep it from getting too wet.
Yeah.
So they would be. I'm just going to try to guess. They would probably be just have a few inches, a few centimeters of dirt on top of them. Like they're not way down deep into the ground when you would
No.
put your own out.
Yeah.
And then you would need some kind of a pipe or tube. Okay.
They use PVC tube sometimes.
Oh,
to do
okay.
that. Yeah. Yeah,
So
that leads to
might-
the outside and it imitates like a hole in the ground.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And is there any way of baiting them or attracting? Like they just find these on their own. They snoop around and they find it.
Yeah, so people try and catch the queen and lead it to the hole.
Oh.
You can. That's what you mean by baiting, right?
I thought maybe a lure.
Putting
like,
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. People
some
have tried
honey or
putting mouse urine scent in.
I
as
don't
it's-
want to work with that. Thank you very much. I would rather not.
Yeah.
But
Man, these bumblebees, they just get. The more you learn about them, the less cute they get.
oh, yeah, they are something else, aren't they? So this first chart that we have looked at, it's the average height of occupied boxes, about 1.18 meters, which is roughly 4 feet, significantly higher occupancy than boxes that are at ground level,
Yeah, or lower down on
or
average. Yeah.
lower down on average.
On average, the unoccupied were
Yes,
just
yes. Okay.
0.65.
Okay, yeah, 0.65. So the next image that we have is actually a graph, and the graph has an axis. Along the x-axis is the height, and this would be meters above ground.
Yeah, this is just another visualization of the previous result.
Okay,
Just to show you how the chance that's on the y-axis
yes,
that a box gets occupied increases as your height that's
Sure
on the
does.
on the x-axis goes up.
it certainly does, and it's kind of got a little bit of an inflection, and so it's not a straight line graph, and then it sort of levels off, because I guess you wouldn't want to go 1,000 meters above ground to have the best results. You're kind of leveling off.
Yeah,
at
we
about-
don't have any data for that. No one did that.
But you did go up to 6 meters,
Some
which
people,
is
yeah.
almost 20 feet.
Yeah, some people
Yeah.
have tried them high up.
Yeah. So at 20 feet or 6 meters above ground, there's almost a perfect success. Like
Well, no, that's predicted, but
Predicted,
the one
okay.
box that actually was tried there, you
Yes.
see it down in the bottom right. It
Yeah.
wasn't occupied.
Oh.
So it's just the overall trend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the trend line.
Yeah.
And it just gets better as you go higher. In other
On
words.
average.
On
Yeah.
average, yes.
This is
But-
the type
but-
of model, yeah.
But there's probably a certain height where this model will
Yeah.
be
No,
okay.
yeah, it's most accurate in the 0 to 2 meters.
Okay.
Let's say that, yeah.
And then we're looking at how you face the nest itself. I was always told that we should face them towards the north.
Right.
Did you get that kind of a result? Like the whole facing north is better than south, or tell me what we're looking at on this table.
Yeah, so I categorized it in 4 different directions, kind of like cardinal, but then most people did face them north, like you said, 154.
Okay.
But then out of those, 26 got occupied. So when you look at the proportion that gets occupied, it actually turns out that west and northwest, the bottom group here, so that would be the group that was occupied 9 times out of 24, actually had a
Yeah.
slightly higher chance than average. you
That's
would say.
getting close to 50%.
Yeah, exactly. But we didn't have a lot of people trying that. So that's a cool result that we could try, let people know, well, if your box hadn't worked, maybe turn it around so it's now facing west-northwest.
Yeah, instead of northeast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, that is interesting. And but your p-value on this is 0.20, which means that we can't really say this is a
No,
definitive
it's
result.
a tendency and not a strict
not
result.
not a statistically strong
Yeah.
result. So the orientation might be better if it's facing north or northwest.
West or north.
West, west, northwest.
Yeah.
Yes. And also slightly better if it's higher up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got two things that people can take home.
Yep.
And when you put your bumblebee nest out, those are 2 things to remember. Another one is, what is the effect of sunlight exposure? Does it sit in full sunlight or is it in the shade? Which is better?
Yeah, that definitely showed up as a tendency to not be full sunlight.
Okay.
So that's the high sunlight category here down in the table. There's very few boxes of the ones that were placed in high sunlight that would be used.
Oh, yeah. Only about 10% occupancy, and your overall
Exactly.
average was twice that
Yeah.
good.
So we think that makes sense because the boxes will get too hot if they have a lot of sun a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then they can't keep up with cooling it. Yeah.
Has there been any experiments with using those styrofoam boxes?
Yeah, those also I know from Europe. They have been successfully used.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh,
Now, the next thing we're looking at, so we've covered height, we've covered orientation, north or south or whatever, and we have looked at the sunlight.
Yep.
And now we're looking at the effect of the box color. So should you paint this wooden box or not?
Yeah, so the strict answer here is we don't really know what color is the best.
Okay.
But there have been some colors that seem to work better than others. So the one that worked the best was actually not painting it. So keeping it the wood color. That seems to be good. They tend to use that more. Whereas we had a bunch of white boxes, and out of those, not too many were used. So maybe white it wasn't as good. But it's a little hard to say because it also depends on the area those white boxes were placed and how many bumblebees there would have been.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say white is not used. Actually, white was the color that was found to be the best by these original guys with the original boxes. You can still see a little bit of the white paint on this old box here.
Yes.
And
Yes.
So could it be possibly that they're detecting the smell of the paint?
that could be possible, but ideally you want to paint it before you use it, so that there shouldn't be any issue with the smell anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But to us, it shouldn't be an issue. But to them,
Right, we don't know that. That's,
we don't know
that's a good
exactly.
point.
Yeah.
A very good point. The only thing that we might be able to say would be if you grouped all the ones with some color, that would imply that they were painted with some sort of latex or water-based paint. And if the group of painted versus the group of unpainted shows a statistical difference, then you would. Did you look at that?
I
or-
did, yeah, and I don't think it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
But a color I'd really like to try more is red. There's only 2 red boxes used so far, and one of them was used.
50% acceptance if they're painted red. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. So your overall takeaways from your research. Let's list them again.
Yeah.
So height.
Yeah, so if you're going to use a box to try and get bumblebees to live in it, above the ground is better than on the ground.
Okay.
Yep.
And what was our next thing that we looked at? Beyond height
Yeah,
was
avoid that. Place them in the full sun.
Yep.
And
yep.
place them so that they do get some sun on their hole. So north didn't work as well as other directions, for example,
right.
west.
Right.
northwest,
Right.
yeah.
So we had. Sorry about that.
Yeah, just the
Okay,
last
no-
slide is good.
Yeah. Okay.
If you keep 2 forward. The other way, sorry. One more. Yeah, this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
it says
So
all
your
the
summary,
results there.
your overall takeaways are. Let's get a drum roll.
Yeah, place it above the ground.
Place it above the ground
Avoid placing it in the sun.
in the sun.
Not in the sun.
Not in the sun.
Yeah.
It has to have some shade. Yeah.
If you don't want to paint it, it's fine.
Okay.
But if you want, try cool colors.
Yeah.
We always want to learn about it.
Yeah.
And if you're, if you have options on how to orient it,
Mhm.
make it so that there's some sun hitting it in the morning because they like to store.
Oh, okay. So they can wake up in the morning.
Yeah,
They can
and
get
then
their-
also evening works well too.
Oh, okay. Okay. So just before they go to bed.
Yep.
Yeah. And in the middle of the day, it'd be nice if they had a bit of shade on them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, maybe you have or have not done this, but when you see you have about 4 or 5 variables, so you could do a multi-regression analysis on this.
Yeah.
And because I could imagine that you might have a white box 6 meters up facing south
Yeah.
in the sun.
Yeah.
And so you have things that will interfere. So do you have some general statement out of all of it? Like if you looked at the most important factor, I guess that would be one result of a multi-regression analysis would be what is the defining or what are the defining elements in placing the nest?
I'd say height and sun.
Height and sun. So
Yeah.
those are the 2 things that anybody that's borrowing or building these nests, they would want to think about that.
Yeah. And we do want more data
And you want more data.
because then we can do that analysis.
So where
that you
could
just
they
said.
reach out? Well, actually, yeah. Sorry, talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah, we can. If you want to try and home some bumblebees in your yard or wherever you have space to place a box, you can find out how to do it on our website here for the Bee Council. There's instructions also on how to build your own box. And we are looking to maybe provide some more opportunities for people to learn how to do it if they're not like handy, just to come out to workshops and get help with
Oh,
it
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, if they're all thumbs like me, that would be great. So the website is www.Alberta Native Bee Council, all one long word, .ca, not .com, but .ca.
Yeah.
So one long word, Alberta Native Bee Council, and council is COUNCIL.
Yeah.
So that kind of council. And we will have a link on the podcast's show notes.
Yeah, and from there you go to the projects and the Bumblebee project if you are interested in the bumblebees.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Wow, we learned a lot today. This was really a good episode.
We did, yes. I wanted to ask you about your childhood inspirations and what got you into,
No, too late. We were supposed to ask that at the beginning.
But I have a feeling that you'll be back, and I
Sure.
think we'll leave that for part 2.
All right.
Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to be back.
I
Yeah.
would say so too.
Thank you.
Oh, we really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. And I
You're
know
welcome.
You're busy, and it's just really appreciated that you would come in.
Yes.
So, everybody, thank you for listening again, and continue to follow these podcasts and these video casts on YouTube. And if you want to, give us a like or a love.
Yep.
And I think it's time to go home.
Yep, that's right. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Well, I shouldn't. You've enjoyed this episode.
They have. And Matthias, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.